want your soul.
Having to spend your nights awake and your days asleep is not made for everybody. This hasn't been a problem for me as a kid since I never managed to fall asleep at night and ended up sleeping during class. I lost count of how many times I woke up to my teacher shouting my name and my classmates staring at me. When I turned 16, I had to start thinking about what career I wanted to pursue, because I usually am wide awake at night. I figured I could become a security guard who works the night shift. I look kind of intimidating as I am tall and often go to the gym, so my sole appearance would tell people not to try and mess with me, although in fact I'm not as tough and strong as I look. That being said, it appears my experience in the field has led me to quite a unique job opportunity. My boss approached me and asked me if I was interested in guarding a hospital for 3 days. He mentioned the job would pay exceptionally well compared to my previous jobs, as it requires experience and a trustworthy person. The opportunity of working in a hospital has not yet been offered to me during my time working here, and it seemed like quite the challenge. If I managed to fulfill the job as expected, it might also result in a salary increase. I promptly accepted the offer, as declining would be foolish. I remember my boss looking relieved upon hearing my response. Supposedly, he struggled to find any other security guards willing to take on this job. "You will start next week on Thursday. Make sure to be there by 10 p.m., he said, shaking my hand. I had a huge smile on my face, excited to get started. "You bet, sir," I said. In the days leading up to the assignment, I guarded a few uneventful shifts at various places, such as a university and a McDonald's. I was happy until the day of the unique opportunity arrived. Not wanting to be late, I drove to the hospital around 8 p.m. It's only about a 30-minute ride, but you never know what might happen, and I wanted to make sure I was on time. I also figured getting to know the place wasn't such a bad idea. I mean, how am I supposed to guard a building I don't know the layout of? Getting there early would give me some time to check it out. I didn't want to screw this up, as it paid me 3 times what I usually make for a gig. It was surprisingly busy on the road, which led me to arrive at the hospital around 8:40 p.m. I got out of my car and made my way to the front door. The building seemed medieval, as it was made from bricks and had this Romanesque charm to it. The building wasn't big, in fact it's rather small. From the outside it seemed the building had 3 floors with short hallways. I pushed the front door open and greeted the lady at the counter. Her smile radiated a welcoming, soothing feeling, easing me of any nerves in an instant. Hello there. I think I was hired for the night shift at this hospital. I'm a bit early, though. I'm supposed to start at 10 p.m. "What's your name, darling?" she asked, maintaining her inviting smile. "Well, I'm Jake," I replied confidently. She started typing on the PC in front of her, seemingly checking whether I was speaking the truth. I mean, you never can be too sure these days. Some crazy people would pretend to be a night shift security guard. "Is your boss Michael?" "Yes, ma'am, it is." "All right. One of the other security guards will be here shortly to explain the procedures. Would you like a cup of coffee in the meantime?" she asked. "I'd love a cup of coffee. Could it be black?" I asked with a grateful face. She chuckled and left me to get my coffee. A few minutes later, she returned. The cup of coffee she gave me tasted amazing, unlike any other cup I've tasted before. Everything seemed to fall right into place, because the security guard approached me right as I finished my cup. The security guard looked at me with skeptical eyes, judging my appearance before saying, "You must be the night security guard, huh? I didn't expect someone so young to show up for the job, but that doesn't matter to me as long as you do as I say," he said. I got out of my chair and held out my hand to shake his hand. "Nice to meet you, sir. I assume you'll be showing me around," I asked confidently. I was always taught that it's important to look confident even though you might not feel confident, as it leaves a positive impression on the people you work for. However, the security guard in front of me was 6'7" and had quite the physique, making it difficult for me not to feel a little bit intimidated. I mean, this guy was huge. "Follow me," he ordered. I followed him and we made our way into the security room. He proceeded to show me how the cameras operate and gave me a tour around the building. He told me some basic security rules, which I've heard too many times. "Oh, and here's the last thing," he mentioned as he was leaving. "You see that paper right there on the desk? Read it. It contains an extra list of rules that you must follow, and if you don't follow the rules, we're all going to know. I hope you are professional enough to take them seriously and follow them, no matter how bizarre or weird they might seem. I looked at him a bit dumbfounded, but swiftly regained my composure and assured him I would follow the rules. "Good luck, kid," he said, and he walked out of the room. I watched him leave as the clock position above the door told me that it was 9:30 p.m., which meant I had 30 more minutes before my shift officially started. And I stared at the paper on the desk, which looked to have 7 total rules. I picked it up and began to read. And the rules are as follows. Rule number 1. Your shift will begin at 10 p.m. Make sure that you are inside the security room by that time. From 10:15 p.m. until 11 p.m., you are required to patrol the building to ensure that no individuals are present. If you encounter anybody, kindly ask them to leave. Rule number 2. Somewhere between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m., a young woman could appear, knocking on the front door asking to see her husband. Ignore her completely and pretend she isn't there until she goes away. Rule number 3. Ensure that the lights inside the intensive care unit remain on throughout your shift. If they happen to turn off, make your way over there and turn them back on. If you hear screaming while the lights are off, run towards the nearest bathroom and stay there until the screaming stops, and then proceed to turn the lights on. Rule number 4. If there's a little girl with a teddy bear in the cafeteria, sit next to her and don't say a word. If she looks at you, walk back to the security room. If she speaks to you, talk back until she leaves. Rule number 5. Around 1 a.m., go to the general ward and check on the patients. If one seems to be sitting on their bed, ask them if they're okay and do whatever they request. If they strike up any conversations besides this, ignore them. Rule number 6. If it starts raining, open the front door and let people in for shelter. Make sure everyone you let inside leaves the building. If someone seems to be missing, you will see them on the security cameras. Do not look at them. Rule number 7. If the security cameras were to turn off any time throughout the night, hide and pray for your life that they don't find you. After I read the rules, I put the paper back down on the desk and leaned back in the chair. I laughed at the sheer bizarreness of the situation. I must be getting pranked, I thought. Though deep down I was not sure that it was a prank. This is pretty fucking weird. I just started this gig. Who leaves a list of rules so detailed like this? This was in fact a hospital, and it seemed unlikely my boss would go to such lengths for a joke as well. Perhaps this was his way of seeing how much he could trust me, to see if I would follow such foolish rules. But I wasn't sure. I reread the rules once again to make sure I understood them. I wanted my boss to know that he could count on me. And I wanted to take these rules seriously because if I needed them, I was going to act. The clock then struck 10 p.m. and I turned my attention to the security cameras. With not much happening on them, and only 15 minutes until I was supposed to patrol, I felt my attention slowly falling towards my phone, which is the best way to waste time. It was already 10:15 p.m. I left my cozy chair, stretched my legs, and made my way out of the security room. I figured that starting at the highest floor and descending my way down would be the best course of action, so I made my way to the highest floor. Thankfully, there was an elevator, so I did not have to bother using the stairs. I made my way up the highest floor and started checking all the rooms, hallways, and even the bathrooms. And as expected, nothing happened. The thing about working the night shift as a security guard is mostly that someone must be at the location in case something happens. Most of these gigs pretty much are just me by myself. However, this doesn't mean that nothing will happen. It just makes it boring and an easy way to earn money. On top of that, I usually get to grab free coffee and snacks whenever I want. It's not that bad. No one seemed to be on the 3rd floor, so I decided to descend the 2nd floor of the building. After patrolling the 2nd floor, I reached the conclusion I had set for myself beforehand. There was nothing special going on. I reached for my phone to check the time and see if I needed to hurry. It was 10:32 p.m. when I finished the 2nd floor, giving me enough time to explore the 1st floor. It did strike me as a little weird, however, that there was literally no one in the hospital. I expected it to be mostly vacant, but I did expect to see someone, doctors, or patients in the building, as that is the entire point of a hospital. However, every room I checked so far has been completely empty. If my boss was indeed trying to test me, he went all in on the preparations. Despite that, I proceeded to the first floor, which contained the intensive care unit, the ICU, the security room, the front door, and the cafeteria. Which contained the intensive care unit, security room, front door, and cafeteria. I planned to pass through the ICU and main hall area first so I could finish off with the cafeteria and get myself something to eat. As I made my way through the ICU, I was caught by surprise when I noticed an old man, around 70 years old, standing in one of the rooms. He seemed to be wonderstruck for a bit, and I recalled rule number 1. If you encounter anyone, kindly ask them to leave. And suddenly, everything fell into place. I realized that my boss had likely hired an actor and allowed him inside the building to test my adherence to the rules. Well, not tonight, and not on this shift. I'm not going to be had or made a joke of. And so with a sigh, I made my way toward the man. "Excuse me, sir. You are not supposed to be here at this time. I would like to kindly ask you to leave," I firmly asserted. The old man looked at me without saying a word, appearing confused by what I had just said to him. "Sir, I would kindly like to ask you to leave," I repeated. He nodded his head in agreement and followed me out of the building. "Have a good night, sir," I told him as he walked away. Right before he completely vanished into the darkness, the old man unexpectedly spoke. "Be careful of the night surgeon," he said. What did he mean by that? I quickly realized my boss must have told him to say something to scare me, so I quickly disregarded it. I continued my patrol around the floor. No one else seemed to be on the first floor, so I grabbed another cup of coffee and a croissant from the cafeteria. It was 10:53 p.m. and I made my way back to the security room. Once inside, I leaned back in my chair and played some games on my phone, confident no one was in the building and I had nothing to worry about. After playing games on my phone for a while and checking the time, I was surprised to see it was nearly 12 a.m. I had spent over an hour playing games on my phone and I shifted my attention to the security cameras, scanning for any anomalies. My heart skipped a beat as I noticed the lights of the ICU were switched off. I cursed at myself for not paying attention as I had no idea how long the lights had been off, and the rules stated to turn them on as soon as possible. I quickly left the security room to turn on the lights. As I walked towards the ICU, I froze in my steps. The sounds of people screaming was deafening. I was baffled by the situation, unsure if my boss would take it this far, just to see if I'd follow the rules. The agony in the screams was noticeable and raised my anxiety. Could these be actors? That's when I heard a door open and close, followed by footsteps making their way towards my location. Without hesitating, I bolted to the bathroom on the first floor and locked myself in one of the toilet stalls. I tried to gather my composure and make sense of the situation I found myself in. I couldn't seem to understand how it was possible for anyone to even be in the building at this hour. Their screams of agony felt so real that it left no room to think this was staged by my boss. Those screams were terrifying. Before I could fully reclaim my composure, the bathroom door then swung open, and the same footsteps I heard before walked inside. I tried to stay as silent as possible, not knowing if the person had a weapon or not. For a second, the silence was deafening, until the person started whispering a song to himself. "Welcome to the hospital, welcome to the hospital. You can come, but you can't go. Welcome to the hospital, welcome to the hospital," he murmured as he knocked on the doors of every bathroom stall. I jumped when he knocked on mine, the sound noticeably louder than the others. Through the gap beneath the door, I could see his feet on the other side, completely motionless. "Is anyone there?" he said with a deranged tone. "Open up, don't be shy," he continued. My heart pounded in my chest as I held on to the silence. I remained frozen, praying he would soon leave me alone so I could get the fuck out of there. The man persisted, knocking on the door as an attempt to gain any reaction out of me. "Oh, come on, Jakey Jake. I need your help with something," he cried out desperately. I felt my blood turn cold at the sound of him mentioning my name, unsure as to how he would have known it. I stayed still and did not make a sound. After a couple of minutes, he gave up and walked out of the bathroom. Right before he left, one more sentence left his mouth. "See you soon, Jake." I didn't leave the bathroom for another 10 minutes until the screaming had finally stopped. I unlocked the bathroom stall I was in and slowly opened the door that led towards the main hall, making sure no one was in sight. I exited the bathroom and slowly made my way to the ICU to turn the lights back on. Right after I turned the lights on, I ran towards the security room as it suddenly felt like the only safe place in the building. As I let myself fall back into the cozy chair, I looked at the time displayed on my phone, which indicated that it was 12:51 a.m. Still somewhat full of the adrenaline of what had just happened, I quickly reread all the rules to see if I had acted the way I was supposed to, and thankfully that was the case. As I got to Rule 5, I was given a lovely reminder to check up on the patients around 1 a.m. and fulfill any wishes they had. Though I was not too sure if I was ready for another endeavor, I was more afraid of what might happen if I don't oblige to the rules. Despite during my patrol I did not see anyone in the patient rooms, how could there be anyone at all? It just didn't make sense. I made my way up the stairs, this time reluctant to use the elevator, feeling like it might stop working. After all, it's only one floor, so I might as well just use the stairs anyways. As I stepped on the second floor, my heartbeat started increasing slightly, as I didn't know what to expect. I then made my way down the hallway, and I started to hear excessive coughing coming from one of the rooms. I decided to go past the rooms one by one and make sure that I didn't skip any of them. As I peered into the first room, hoping to see nothing except for an empty room, I was disappointed. In the bed lay an old woman, apparently sleeping. She had 2 tubes inside her nostrils and a needle in her arm. And this is when I realized I hate the sight of people in these conditions. In every room were patients who seemed either extremely sick or extremely wounded. While making my way throughout the hallway, the coughing sound became louder, and I started to slowly make my way towards the source. Of course, it was in the last room. All the other patients seemed to be sleeping now, and as I made my way to the last and final room, I took a deep breath before walking in. Despite my nervousness, I stepped into the doorway and saw a man. The man was sitting on his bed, elbow in front of his mouth, and coughing like he had been the past few minutes. When he noticed me, he tried to speak. "Water," he muttered, trying to stop his coughing. For a second I was caught a little off guard. This guy seemed to be an actual patient. I even felt bad for him. I couldn't have imagined what it'd be like to be here for him. I quickly ran down to the cafeteria to grab a cup of water and bring it back up. As he saw me standing in the doorway, his hand signaled this time for me to come closer and hand him the cup of water. I walked towards him and handed it to him. He drank it so fast I figured he had beaten a world record. He then collapsed on his bed and thankfully stopped coughing. "Thank you," he exclaimed. "It's not a problem, man. You seem like you needed it," I replied. After a minute of sitting in silence with the man, I figured it was time for me to leave the room, as I did what he asked. Besides, he didn't say anything else to me, and he didn't act like he wanted to talk. Apparently, he was just happy to have had his water. As I made my way to the door and wanted to grab the handle, he then spoke. "Where are you going?" "Come sit with me, my friend." A chill went down my spine as I heard him speak. His entire tone changed from before, and he sounded serious now. I slowly turned my head back to him, realizing I had no choice but to do what he asked, and so I sat down next to him on the bed. What's up? What can I do for you?" I tried to say it confidently, but I failed in doing so. "I'm not going to hurt you, son. I appreciate you helping me. You see, the surgeon stuffed something down my throat, and it led me to be unable to breathe. I wanted to tell you to be careful because he's still wandering in the building somewhere." "He stuffed something down your throat?" I asked in disbelief. And that's when I remembered the old man from before in the bathroom. He also said be careful of the surgeon. Yeah, he did, and I wanted to warn you. This seems to be your first time here, and I figured you'd like to know that there's a maniac inside this building. If you do what the rules say, kid, you'll be okay." I then looked at him in fright. After taking a deep breath and standing up, I thanked him and made my way out of the room. Thankfully, this time, he didn't ask me to come back. I decided to head back to the security room, and my pace increased when I heard something falling on the 3rd floor. And I remembered that if I follow the rules, I'll be okay. I grabbed the door handle of the security room and closed it as soon as I was inside. A wave of relief crashed over me as I once again felt safe. When I looked at the clock above the door, it indicated the time was now 1:53 a.m. I sat down in the chair and once again read the sheet of paper. Thankfully, there were no more rules stating for me to leave the security room. I prayed to God the rest of the night would be as boring as all my previous jobs had been. I felt relieved knowing my shift ended at 6 a.m., which meant I only had 4 hours left to go, and I could tell that the events that occurred had taken a toll on my energy, I felt really exhausted. I stared at the security cameras until I felt my eyelids start to close and my mind drift away. Then I fell asleep in the chair, completely forgetting about where I was even at to begin with. I jolted awake around 2:45 a.m. and gave my body and mind some time to adjust to reality, as I had no clue where I was when I woke up. After a short while, I came to my senses and I realized I was in the middle of my night shift. Though still feeling the effects of waking up, I made my way to the cafeteria to grab myself another cup of coffee. I figured it'd help me stay awake for the rest of the night. I walked into the empty cafeteria and made my way to the coffee machine. I watched the coffee pour into my cup, entertained by the sight of it. As I turned around to go back to the room, I jumped and spilled the coffee all over my suit. Although no one was in the cafeteria when I walked in, there was now a little girl sitting at one of the tables. Unsure of what the rules exactly said about this occurrence, I tried my best to remember them. My train of thought was interrupted once I noticed the little girl had turned around and was now looking at me. She had a small white skirt and a pink t-shirt with blonde curly hair going just as far as her shoulders. In her hand, she held a teddy bear with buttons as eyes, except one of the eyes was hanging on by a thread. She looked at me without any expression on her face, making me feel uncomfortable and uncertain as to what I should do. All I could remember from the rules is that I had to sit next to her. Though I was reluctant, not entirely sure why, I felt like it was the safest course of action. In the end, it was only a little girl. What's the worst that could happen? I sat down next to her, her eyes intently staring at mine. She did not say a word for a long time, and I felt extremely uncomfortable, unsure of when I could leave. And that is when she started giggling, covering her mouth with one hand while holding her teddy bear with the other. "You forgot the rules," she said in a frightening and teasing tone. I looked at her confused, thinking I had remembered them correctly. She could see the panic look in my eyes, enjoying the sight of it. "You want to play hide and seek?" she excitedly asked. "I'll count to 60 and then we will come looking for you." I didn't bother to ask who we was. She looked at me like a kid looks at candy in a candy store. I then ran into the security room, leaving my coffee next to the girl, and as I ran away, I could hear her counting. 1, 2, 3, forever with me you'll be. 4, 5, 6, in the darkness you'll cease to exist. I locked myself in the night shift security room and quickly grabbed the rules as I reread Rule 4. If there's a little girl with a teddy bear in the cafeteria, sit next to her and don't say a word. If she looks at you, walk back to the security room. If she speaks to you, talk back until she leaves. My throat turned dry as I realized I just fucked up. I broke one of the rules. I remembered her mentioning hide and seek, and that's when suddenly all the security cameras shut off. Rule number 7. If the security cameras were to turn off any time throughout the night, hide and pray for your life they won't find you. I completely lost it as I did not know what to expect or where I should hide. All I knew is that the security room was way too obvious for me to stay in, as there's no way I could escape from here. I was overtaken by adrenaline and it felt like my body was moving on its own. I reached for the front door and frantically tried to open it, but the door didn't budge no matter how hard I kicked. 52, 53, 54, 55, prepare to run for your life, the little girl sang from inside the cafeteria. Despite feeling mentally overwhelmed, making me feel dizzy and close to passing out, my body had gotten a mind of its own. I ran up the stairs to the second floor, to the room of the patient I had given a cup of water. I opened the door to his room, only to see he was no longer there. That did not matter to me at that point, however, as I just wanted to find a proper hiding spot. I could already hear the little girl frantically laughing and singing as she had counted to 60. Unsure of how long I had before she would be coming to this room, I decided I had to hide as soon as possible. I looked around the room for any suitable hiding spots, but there didn't seem to be any. The best option I seemed to have was to get inside the ceiling, as it was made from plates that could be pushed up. I stood on the bed to get closer to it and hopefully pull myself up, and I accidentally kicked the photo from the nightstand next to the bed. The sound of it hitting the tile floor echoed throughout the entire building. "I heard that," she screamed as I heard her running towards my location. I was completely freaking out and realizing I had to be quick. I then jumped as high as I could and held onto the ceiling, pulling myself up as fast as I could. I I could tell the ceiling and the vents weren't made for any person to be hiding on top of it, as every little move I made caused it to cave. Once I was securely in the ceiling, I blocked the square hole and I laid completely still, not wanting to make a sound or have the chance of the ceiling falling. I could then hear the little girl enter the room excitedly, tiptoeing around. "I know you're in here. I heard you drop something," she said in a playful tone, enjoying every second of it. My heartbeat skyrocketed throughout the entirety of the situation, unsure whether she would find me or not. She poked into the ceiling with a broom then, trying to figure out if I was up there. I almost jumped once I felt the vibrations of the broom touching the ceiling, and I managed to lay still, not making a sound. "I guess you're not here then," she said disappointingly as she walked out of the room and continued to keep searching. I could feel the ceiling giving in to my weight, which meant I had to find a different hiding spot. And after a couple of minutes and making sure she was no longer nearby, I slowly descended back into the room, and onto the bed, being as quiet as I could. I peered my head into the hallway to see if anyone was there, but no one was. I then made my way through the hallway with the smallest steps I could make, flinching at every sound I heard. I figured my next best course of action would be to hide on the first floor, since that's where she came from and she had likely already checked the entire floor already. Though I didn't know exactly where she was, I figured she would be upstairs on the third floor. I slowly then made my way downstairs, making sure that no one was there. As I heard her shoes touching the tile on the floor above me, I knew I was safe to walk around on the first floor for a little while. But this seemed to be a horrible idea, because the moment I turned the corner I could see the silhouette of a man standing near the ICU. And I could see his face turn to me, and I quickly jumped behind the wall hoping he didn't see me. "What is a patient of mine doing out of his room so late?" the man asked. Realizing I didn't have long before he would be to me, I had two options. My first option was to run back upstairs and hope I would not encounter the girl, and maybe find another hiding spot there. My second option was to run to the bathroom once again in hopes I'd be safe there. But I didn't like either of those options, as I felt either one would lead me to getting caught. Though I did not feel like I had the time to go back upstairs at all, I opted to run towards the bathroom. Right before I went to enter the bathroom, I noticed the janitor's closet underneath the stairs. Switching plans and feeling like that might be my best chance of survival, I opened the door and hid myself behind a container and a pile of trash bags. "Oh, come on out now. I need to inspect your organs," the man proclaimed as I heard him open the bathroom door. His voice sounded familiar, but at first, I didn't seem to understand why. That was until he finished searching the bathroom. "Ah, you were smart enough to hide somewhere else this time. I'm impressed you're not as stupid as you look," he said, and then I realized who he was. The guy sounded exactly like a maniac I had encountered before. My blood then froze because I knew that he knew where I was at all along. He then opened the janitor closet and looked around for a bit, but decided it was too small for someone to hide in, so he closed it soon after, leaving me in utter darkness, too horrified to do anything. I stayed locked in there for the rest of the night, not coming out until I knew it was completely safe. I heard a drill running, followed by a man screaming in agony. The man, who I assumed was the surgeon, laughed maniacally. I grabbed my phone to see how long I had left until the nightmare was over, 5:45 a.m. Only 15 minutes left until the staff of the hospital would come in for their daily shift. I just had to hold on a little bit longer. I ended up falling asleep in the closet, feeling completely hopeless and defeated, exhausted from the night I had just witnessed. I was woken up by a kind old man who seemed to be the janitor, and who seemed surprised to see a security guard hiding behind his equipment. "Rough night?" he asked, though he already knew the answer based on my expression. "It's over. You can come out now." I got back on my feet and walked into the hallway. The hospital looked completely different during the day than it did at night. Instead of being unsettling, it seemed like a nice place. I thanked the janitor for his kindness and got the hell out of there. I then drove home and collapsed on my bed, not knowing what had just happened. I still could not comprehend what I had witnessed. It all felt like a fever dream. I then called my boss and told him that I was sick and I didn't want to answer any phone calls. After about a week, I then returned to my regular, uneventful shifts at the McDonald's and other places. Though the boredom might be horrible, I don't mind it at all. In the end, I'll never go back to that hospital. And I want to warn anybody, that's working the night shift as a security guard, if you ever come across a strange set of rules, take my advice and just get the fuck out of there.